Hi, I'm Raine Emery, and this is the tutorial for Simplicity 3190. It is a cloak pattern and one with ruffle details. All seams are going to be 5/8 of an inch unless otherwise stated, so let's get started. Here we have Simplicity 3190, and if you flip it onto the back, on the top flap here are the measurements that you will need to know to determine what size you or the person who will be wearing this will need to make this. And then right here are the suggested fabric types and notions, and then here are the fabric amounts that you'll need based on the size. And here are the finished garment measurements. Okay, there's no way I can fit this all into frame, so we're going to start out with number 2, which is the back of the cloak. Here's the fabric that I've cut out. So I've cut 2 out of the main fabric and 2 out of a lining, which the lining is a different fabric, and I've set that aside for now. So first, go ahead and add a stay stitch, 1/2 of an inch, starting from this curved shoulder edge here all the way to the center back on both pieces so that it doesn't stretch out too much when we're working on it. And then once you've done that, go ahead and place both pieces right sides together in the center back seam. So the center back for me is just on the selvage. There is a lot of fabric here. So go ahead and pin from the top here on the center back and stitch all the way down to the bottom. Okay, we have that center back sewn now, and I have pressed it open so it is nice and flat. And then I'm going to set this aside for a second. Oop, and I keep dropping everything. And here is pattern 1, which is the front of the cloak. Now for the fronts, we are also going to do something similar to what we did to the back on the neckline, which is starting at the shoulder line, doing a 1/2 inch stay stitch all the way to center front. And you're going to do that on both pieces. And then with the combined back right side up, match up the shoulders right sides together of the back with the front like this, matching up the notches and pinning all the way down and matching up the ends. Now that these two sides are pinned, so starting from the neckline down all the way to the end and then press it open. That is all sewn, and this is what it looks like on the inside, and I pressed it open. So we are going to set aside the main body of the cloak for now. Now bring out patterns 3 and 4. So just a quick note, I am using a different color than this, a little bit of a design choice. On the wrong side, just a heads up, I did mark the lines from the patterns onto the fabric, and also the dots too, of course. Place them right sides together with the shoulder seam, just like we did with the main body of the cloak, and then pin it all the way down on these sides, and then start sewing from up here and go all the way down, matching notches. Once it's pinned, sew it in the way that I showed you from the neck point all the way down and on the other end as well, and then press it open. Now that you have sewn and pressed those seams, we are going to now add gathering stitches all along this. I've already gone ahead and done this side. I flip it over. I don't know if you can see the lines. According to the lines that are on the pattern, so here, 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 and also on the center fronts and on the shoulder seams where we just sewed, you are going to stitch away from the line 1/8 of an inch on either side. So you're going to have 2 gathering stitches on the center front, 2 gathering stitches here, 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 and here. You're going to do that all the way around. So that is what I've done on this side. Let me zoom in so you can see it better. For the center front, I've stitched away 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 of an inch since there's no middle line. And then here is a line, here's a line, and on this seam, the middle line is the seam. And also just a note, stitch between these 2 dots and then these 2 dots. So I'm stitching 1/8 of an inch away from this side and also 1/8 of an inch away from this side with gathering stitches. And for the center front edges, you're just going to stitch 1/4 of an inch away and then 1/2 of an inch away with gathering stitches. Not gonna lie, it's actually looking like Belle's skirt right now. Those gathering stitches are all in. I'll give you one look over. Here is the center back, so there is no ruching on the center back. All right, we're ready for the next step. Go ahead and pull out patterns 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I cut 2 out of each out of 1/2 inch twill, but if you have ribbon, that will work too. I've also transferred the dots. So this is how it'll work. This is where these pieces of twill tape will be matched up on each gathering section. The center front will not have a twill tape. You can just copy this, or you can figure it out by, on here it says gathering line 1, trim 1, so we'll want to look for trim 1, which is number 5. It says guide for trim 1 here. And then once you've got that all figured out, match the dots with each other on either side. And make sure that this is the wrong side. Right now I have it right side up, but make sure it's the wrong side. And then you're going to pin the dots to the dots over here, and then dot to dot up here, and then gather to fit, and then pin all the way down. And it should look something like this. Take this to the sewing machine and add 1 single stitch down the middle of each twill tape. And then remove the gathering stitches, so we just have 1 clean line. And now I'm going to remove this gathering stitch and this gathering stitch. So now it should look something like this. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Yay! Next, hem the bottom of this 5/8 of an inch. What I like to do is I like to stitch along the bottom at 5/8 of an inch and then press up towards the wrong side, and then flip this raw edge in towards that crease that you just made and press it like that, and then you'll stitch along that folded edge. And then once that is finished, add 2 gathering stitches to the top here, 1 at 1/4 inch and 1 at 1/2 of an inch, and then we'll continue from there. Now, if you're using a fabric like velvet, it might be really hard to hem the bottom of it, so go ahead and hand stitch it if that's easier. Now flip the overlay so that the right side is up, and this is what it should look like now. Bring out the main body of the cloak again, and then with the right side up, find the neckline, and now place the wrong side of the overlay down onto the right side of the main body cloak. I pinned the center back so we have a starting point. And now with the gathers along the neckline, gather that to fit, matching the shoulder seam with the shoulder seam, and then the center front to the center front. After that, remember the gathering stitches that we added to this center front here. Gather it up until it reaches the dot that you marked for the pattern, this dot here. And after that is lined up and pinned, you're going to repeat this on the other side. Now that it's all pinned, baste from this point all the way around the neckline and to the other point, so everywhere we just pinned. And there you go. Now set this aside for now. And then pull out pattern piece number 10, which is the hood, and make sure that you have all the dots marked and this dart seam transferred over, because the next step is going to be stitching from the bottom here all the way to the top. And this is essentially a dart. So at the very end, instead of back stitching, make the stitching length a little bit smaller and leave a tail with a thread, and then double knot it yourself just so that there's not a bubble right here. So go ahead and do that and make sure that you follow this dart seam line. And then once you've stitched that, add 2 gathering stitches here at the bottom, 1 at 1/4 of an inch and the other one at 1/2 of an inch. And instead of back stitching here, I'm just going to double knot it or triple knot it or quadruple knot it if you'd like. And I'm also just going to leave a little bit of a tail here. All right, now the hood is sewn right sides together, and I also pressed it open and I clipped this part of the dart seam open a little bit so I could really press it there. And then I added 2 gathering stitches at the bottom of the hood here. So now we can attach it to the main body of the cloak. All right, here we go. I'm bringing this back out again. So on top of the overlay, right sides together, I'm going to start pinning at the center back and match it up with the center back of the hood. And then this dot here is going to match up with the shoulder seam, and then the center front edge of the hood is going to match up with the center edge of the main body cloak. And repeat that on the other side, then gather to fit and finish pinning. Now stitch where we just pinned from here all the way over to the other side. Now, if your fabric needs it, especially if it's a little bit bulkier like mine is, You are going to trim this seam in layers just so we can reduce bulk. So what I do is I angle my scissors at a 45-degree angle-ish, and then I just trim the gathered part so the bulk is reduced. Okay, looking good. Since my fabric is prone to bias stretching because it is heavy, I'm going to let this hang out on my dress form. You can also use a hanger, and I'm going to let it stretch overnight or for a few hours. Then after that, I'm going to use patterns number 1 and number 2, match them up here, and then I'm going to cut off whatever excess has stretched out on the bottom of here, and then it'll be even. So now while we do that, we're going to work on the upper and lower ruffles. I am adding 2 different fabrics for 11 and 12 just for a design choice and because it is what I have on hand. We have patterns 11 and 12 here, which are the upper and lower ruffles, and we're just going to put number 12 aside for now and just focus on number 11. So you should have 5 pieces cut out of this on the fold, and I will warn you now, there's a lot of fabric, and you probably already know this if you've cut it out, and there will be lots of gathering, so make sure you set aside enough time to focus on this. First of all, we're going to stitch all of the 5 pieces together on this side, right sides together. So I pinned it here, right sides together, matched up the notches, and then stitched it down, and then I pressed it open. So we have all of this fabric. Oh my gosh. So it's a very, very long, skinny piece of fabric. So then I pressed each seam open like that. And then next, trim one side to about 1/8 of an inch, and then press the other side over to that side of the cut seam, and then press that piece over the cut piece, and then pin it, and then stitch along that folded edge that you just made to close it up. This essentially makes a flat-filled seam, and this helps for the fabric to not fray on you while you're wearing it. So then what it looks like after you've stitched it is like that. And then we're going to finish the seam on all of the other seams that we just did. Just a quick note, do not stitch the center front of the ruffles together. This is one long piece. This is not in a circle. We are not going to be stitching the 2 ends together. We are going to keep them separate. To finish the center front edge, add a 5/8 inch narrow hem similar to what we've already done. So first, press it towards the wrong side, 5/8 of an inch, and then take that raw edge and roll it under so it meets that pressed edge that we just made. Then you're going to stitch down that fold line so it secures it in place, and then it'll look like this. Now, once that is squared away, we are going to finish the hem of the bottom of the lower ruffle. To do that, add a 1 inch narrow hem instead of a 5/8 inch narrow hem. So same process, press up 1 inch and then fold that raw edge in towards that folded crease, and then stitch down that folded edge. Awesome, good job. I know that was a lot. Next, we're going to gather the top edge. So the edge that is still raw, you are going to add a 1/4 inch gathering stitch and a 1/2 inch gathering stitch away from the raw edge. And if you'd like to, you can break the gathering stitch and create a new one at either side of the seams. This fabric is pretty light, so I'm not too worried about that. So I'm just going to keep going all the way around. It's going to be a lot of thread, but you can do it. And then we'll have some gathering stitches, and then we can gather it. The upper ruffle is ready to be attached to the main body of the cloak. Oh, there we go. I let it hang and I trimmed the bottom of it, so now it's all even. And I also remarked the dots where it needed to be remarked. So now, focusing on the bottom, we're going to start matching the upper ruffle right sides together. So I matched up the center back with the center of the ruffle, and I also have this placed 5/8 of an inch away from the raw edge of the main cloak. And then on the first ruffle seam away from the center front edge, you are going to place that at the dot that is on the bottom of the pattern of the front cloak, and then place the next dot, which is on the back cloak, with the next seam, and now gather to fit. All right, it's all pinned and ready to go. Sew all the way across the gathers to set it in place. that is sewn on, and that's what the ruffles are starting to look like. So pretty. Now we're not done yet. We have yet another set of ruffles. Bring out pattern number 12, which is a lower ruffle, and we are going to repeat this process all over again. So we're going to sew all 5 pieces together, finish the seams, hem the seams, and then gather it and attach it the same exact way that we did with the upper ruffle, except it'll be going on top of the upper ruffles. I'll see you back here when we're all finished with that. Good luck! Okay, I'm back, and the lower ruffle has been sewed on, and that is what the upper ruffle looks like with it. So another note, I have serged the edges. This is not necessary whatsoever. The fabric that I am using kept fraying, so this was the way to stop that. And I've pressed that seam up towards the cloak, and the ruffles are pressed down. So they are nice and flat, and we are ready for the next step. I'm going to flip this around right side up. Now is time to add the trim if that is your choice. I will be using this trim. I am going to start by pinning it just along the edge of where the seam meets the ruffles. So along the straight edge is where I'm going to pin that, and making sure I don't go past the ruffle edge, because we will be sewing 5/8 of an inch right here later. And if you need to, you can fold your trim like this if it's fraying or it has like a rough edge, and then pin it around. And once you have that pinned, go ahead and slip stitch it all the way down. The trim is done and sewn on. For the next step, you will take the lining pieces of the cloak and make it the same exact way that we made the main body of the cloak, except you're not adding the ruffle overlay here. That'll just be silly. So this is what the lining should look like, with the hood attached and all pieces of the cloak sewn together like that. So now we are ready to attach it to the main body of the cloak. Before we attach it to the actual cloak, on the lining on the wrong side, flip up the bottom 5/8 of an inch all the way around over to here and press. If it's easier for you, I like to stitch it all the way around at 5/8 of an inch and then press up on that stitching line. The bottom is pressed up 5/8 of an inch. So now I'm going to take this to the floor to show you the next step. Okay, I hope this is a little bit easier to see. At this step, take the lining and place it right sides together over on top of the main cloak, and pin starting at the bottom here. This part right here is folded up 5/8 of an inch because of the ruffle seam, and this is also pressed up 5/8 of an inch. So just line that up and then pin that, and then match up the rest of the outside. We're not going to worry about the bottom of the lining right now. We're going to leave that open. We're just going to go all the way around, pinning up the hood and all the way around to the other side. Matching notches. For the hood, for the seam with the hood and the cloak, I have the seams pinned down. Once that is pinned, sew all the way around where we just pinned, and we will understitch the lining afterwards. Now after I sewed that seam, I trimmed it a little bit, and now we're going to add understitching onto the lining here. So flip it out so that this is what you see, and then starting here, make sure that the seam is facing the lining. Start understitching on the lining itself, pretty close to that seam, all along the seam that you just sewed. This is what it is looking like now, and I pressed those edges down where we just sewed, so it's looking really nice and neat. And the bottom here, there's so much fabric, oh my goodness. The bottom here is still open, and we need that to be open right now so we can go back inside and find the seam of the hood to the cloak on both the lining and the main cloak. And now we're going to match together the center back and the shoulder seams, and then pin that. And then we are going to tack this together at the center back, the shoulder seams, and if you want to go a little bit further just to make it super secure, you can do that. This just helps the two layers to stay together and not, you know, move around too much. So yeah, you can do this by machine or by hand. Okay, that's all done. Now flip it back out, so right sides are out, and then let's find the bottom of the lining and where the ruffles are on the main body of the cloak. Now we're going to close up the bottom of the seam here, and with the pressed edge I'm going to start with the center back and pin it to the center back ruffle seam here. Then I'm going to match up the side seams, then line up the rest of this and pin it, and then slip stitch it closed. It looks so nice and pretty. Yay, that took a minute, but we did that and it paid off, so good job. Now we're gonna set this aside and work on the bow. Pull out patterns 13, 14, and 15, which are all parts of the bow. First, take number 13 and with the notched side, fold it to match those two notches together, pin the raw edges. So you're gonna stitch all the way around, but leave a gap in the center so we can turn this right side out. Then you're gonna clip the corners, pull it out, press it, and then slip stitch the opening closed. Should look like that, and then I'm going to trim the corners and then flip it right side out through the opening. Poke out the corners if you need to. I am using a chopstick, and then press and slip stitch this opening closed. All right, that one is all ready to go, and I will set this aside, and then I will bring out number 14, which is the tie end. Fold it in half lengthwise, hot dog style, pin it, and then you're going to repeat the same exact thing on this one that you did on number 13, which you will sew all the way around the raw edges, but leave an opening in the center so you can pull it out through there, clip the curves, pull it right side out, press, and slip stitch the opening closed. And done. I'm going to set this aside, pull out number 15, which is the knot, and on the notched edges, I'm going to match that up, pin it, and then sew only on the notched edge. Then once it's sewn, you can trim the seam if you'd like to, then flip it right side out, and then press it so the seam is in the center. Done. And as you can see, the seam is on the underside here, and it's pressed and ready to go. Pull out number 13 again, which is our bow. And if you remember in elementary school when we made those little accordion fan things, that's what we'll be doing again. So fold it in half lengthwise, then fold the other side to the other edge, flip it around, and repeat that. So you have this stacked fold going for you. And then in the center, add a quick hand stitch to secure this. So it'll look like a bow. Now pull out number 14 and find the center and then pleat it. Do a similar pleat, but there is obviously less fabric here. And then with that, attach it to the back of the bow that you just made in the center. So it'll look something like this. And on the back, that's what it looks like. Now pull out the knot. I have pretty thick fabric, so let's see if we can make this work. Cover the middle of both the tie and the bow. Then on the back side, oh yeah, this might be a little bit difficult. So on the back side, you're going to flip it over and then flip the other seam over like that. And then hand stitch that down, and then you will have a knot. Here is the finished bow, and I unfortunately just had to whip stitch it because this fabric that I'm using in particular is very thick, so it didn't reach over all the way, so I just whip stitched it. And I also added the knob side of a snap on the left side here, close to the knot, and that way we can have this as a closure. We are moving on to finishing steps now. Woohoo! Place the cloak on a dress form or on yourself or the person who's going to be wearing this, and see where the shoulder seam of the overlay ends, and go ahead and tack that in place there on the shoulder seam, so matching shoulder seam to shoulder seam. And if the rest of these channels need it, go ahead and tack it down where they lay nicely, and it should lay nicer. Now you don't have to do this part if you don't want to or do not need it, but I like doing this because it makes the hood more secure when you're wearing it. So what I did is I put it on and I determined where I would want this little hair clip slash little hair comb to be, and I determined it's going to be right here, so I will hand stitch that on. And There we go. Next, I'm gonna take this hook and eye, which is a bigger size than I normally work with, but that is because this fabric is very heavy and it needs more of a heavy duty closure. And right below the hood seam, add the eye on this side, right there, and then add the hook onto this side. Again, right below the hood seam, and then hand stitch those on. Ta-da! We are so close to being finished. We're almost there. Okay, now I'm gonna balance the pins up here. Hopefully they stay. Take your bow and place it in the center, and on the side where the snap is not, on this side, you'll find where you want to add that placement just right over the hook and eyes and right under the hood seam. And then hand stitch the underside of the bow. I'm probably gonna stitch right at the knot here onto this side of the cloak. Once you've done that, place it on the dress form again, and then find the placement of where the other snap side will be. So it'll be, and then mark it and then hand stitch that on. So the socket side of the snap should be about right here for me. All done. Here is how the closure works. You'll first hook on the hook and eye like that, and then you'll take the snap and snap it in. The closure is now all done. For the very last step, we are going to add trim around the hood. So it can be any trim that you want, really. I have about 2-inch trim here, and I will place it down with the straight edge about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch away from that pressed edge. And if you need to, with this seam right here, you can fold the trim if it frays easily or if it looks nicer, and place it along the seam line of the hood and the cloak, and then pin it all the way down and onto the other side. And then once that is pinned, slip stitch all the way around on both sides, especially if your trim is wider. And there you go. You are all done. Great work.